Robert never imagined that his wife's refusal to process their shared grief would lead her into a 5-month affair that would fundamentally challenge everything he believed about marriage, forgiveness, and the price of trying to keep a family together. At 42, this devoted father of 3 boys found himself trapped between his desire to protect his children and his growing recognition that some betrayals create wounds that may never fully heal, especially when the person who caused them continues behaviors that feel like ongoing betrayal. The foundation of Robert and his 40-year-old wife Sarah's 18-year marriage had seemed solid and stable, marked by what he believed was mutual respect and shared commitment to their family. They had built a life together that included 3 sons and what appeared to be a partnership that could withstand the normal challenges that all long-term relationships face. However, approximately 3 years before the affair discovery, Robert and Sarah experienced a devastating series of back-to-back miscarriages that would test their relationship in ways they had never anticipated. These losses represented not just the death of hoped-for children, but also the shattering of dreams and plans that the couple had made for their growing family. Robert's response to the miscarriages demonstrated his emotional maturity and his understanding of the importance of processing grief together as a couple. He attempted to create space for them to talk through their losses, work through their emotions, and support each other during an incredibly difficult period in their marriage. However, Sarah's reaction to the miscarriages revealed a fundamental difference in how she and Robert approached emotional processing in grief. Rather than engaging with Robert's attempts to work through their shared trauma, Sarah withdrew and refused to participate in the kind of emotional work that might have strengthened their bond and helped them heal together.
Sarah's unwillingness to process the miscarriages with Robert created an emotional distance in their marriage that she would eventually fill with attention and validation from someone outside the relationship. This pattern, avoiding difficult emotional work within the marriage while seeking comfort elsewhere, would become central to understanding how the affair developed. Approximately 1 year after the miscarriages, Robert discovered that Sarah had been conducting a 5-month affair with a man from her CrossFit gym. The discovery came through finding messages on her Instagram account, revealing that the affair had been sustained and secretive, involving both emotional and likely physical betrayal. When Robert confronted Sarah with the evidence of her affair, she immediately admitted to the relationship, rather than attempting to deny or minimize what had occurred. This admission, while somewhat encouraging in terms of honesty, also confirmed that Robert's worst fears about his wife's behavior were accurate. Have you ever experienced a loss that your partner refused to process with you? How does unresolved grief affect a relationship's ability to withstand other challenges? The discovery that Sarah had been having an affair was devastating enough, but the circumstances surrounding the relationship made Robert's healing process significantly more complicated. The affair partner was not a stranger, but someone who remained a regular part of Sarah's daily routine through their shared CrossFit gym attendance. Following the affair discovery, Sarah made the decision to continue attending the same gym, at the same class times, with the same group of people that included her former affair partner. This choice demonstrated either a lack of understanding about the impact of her continued proximity to her affair partner, or a willingness to prioritize her own comfort over her husband's healing needs.
Robert made it clear to Sarah that he was not comfortable with her continued attendance at the gym, where she would regularly encounter her affair partner. However, Sarah chose to ignore his concerns and continue with her established routine, showing a pattern of prioritizing her own desires over the relationship's recovery needs. Sarah's justification for continuing at the gym was that CrossFit represented her primary outlet and source of community outside the home. She framed the gym as essential to her well-being and social connections, essentially arguing that Robert's discomfort was less important than her need for this particular form of exercise and community. The description of the CrossFit community as having a cult mentality suggested that Sarah's attachment to this environment went beyond simple fitness or even normal social connection. This level of commitment to a group that included her affair partner created ongoing triggers and concerns for Robert's ability to trust and heal. Robert's admission that he didn't put his foot down during the initial shock period highlighted one of the common mistakes that betrayed spouses make in the immediate aftermath of discovery. The trauma and disbelief often prevent clear thinking and firm boundary setting when such actions are most crucial for protecting the betrayed spouse's emotional well-being. Sarah's refusal to provide Robert with full access to her phone represented another significant red flag in their recovery process. Transparency with digital communications is typically considered a basic requirement for rebuilding trust after infidelity, yet Sarah was unwilling or unable to provide this level of openness. When someone refuses to provide transparency after betraying your trust, what does that tell you about their commitment to rebuilding the relationship? How important is access to phones and social media in affair recovery?
The incident where Sarah literally smashed her phone when Robert asked to see it revealed the depth of her resistance to transparency and suggested that she had ongoing communications or information that she was determined to hide from her husband. This extreme reaction indicated panic and desperation to conceal something significant. Sarah's decision to add passcode and Face ID protection to her phone after the affair discovery was particularly concerning, as she had never used these security measures before being caught cheating. This change suggested that she was implementing new strategies to hide her communications rather than working toward openness and transparency. Robert's admission that he had looked through Sarah's phone several times while she was sleeping revealed his ongoing suspicions and his lack of trust in her claims about ending contact with her affair partner. These covert investigations, while understandable, also indicated that their relationship had become characterized by suspicion and surveillance, rather than trust and communication. The discovery that Sarah had attended a Halloween event that included her affair partner demonstrated that her claims about avoiding contact were false. She was still participating in social activities that included him, showing that she was either lying about the level of contact or was unwilling to make the social sacrifices necessary for her husband's comfort and their marriage's recovery. Sarah's inclusion of her affair partner in her regular circle of gym friends created an impossible situation for Robert, who was expected to trust that appropriate boundaries were being maintained while his wife continued to socialize with someone she had betrayed him with. This ongoing connection made it virtually impossible for Robert to feel secure or confident about the status of their relationship.
Robert's request for information about any contact between Sarah and her affair partner was reasonable and necessary for his peace of mind. However, Sarah's eventual refusal to provide this information, claiming they needed to move on, showed her unwillingness to prioritize his healing needs over her own comfort and convenience. The fact that Sarah became unwilling to discuss or report on interactions with her affair partner after only 2-3 months suggested that she viewed affair recovery as something that should be quickly resolved, rather than as an ongoing process that might require years of patient rebuilding. This timeline expectation was unrealistic and harmful to Robert's healing process. How long should affair recovery take? And what ongoing accommodations should the cheating partner make to help rebuild trust? Is it reasonable to expect someone to change gyms or social circles after an affair? The couple's approach to counseling revealed another area where Sarah was reluctant to engage in the work necessary for relationship repair. For almost 2 years following the affair discovery, Sarah claimed she wasn't ready for counseling, effectively delaying professional intervention that might have helped them navigate their crisis more effectively.
Sarah's resistance to counseling suggested either shame about discussing her affair with a professional, fear of being held accountable for her actions, or a belief that the marriage could recover without outside intervention. All of these reasons indicated a lack of full engagement with the recovery process. Robert's current feeling that they were attending counseling primarily because he felt it was necessary, rather than because Sarah was motivated to work on their relationship, highlighted the imbalanced nature of their recovery efforts. Successful affair recovery typically requires both partners to be equally committed to the process.
Sarah's attitude that counseling was not something that has to happen for us to get better demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the depth of damage that infidelity causes to a relationship. Her casual approach to professional help suggested that she was either minimizing the impact of her affair or was overconfident about their ability to repair the relationship without expert guidance. Sarah's admission that she was 100% at fault and that Robert had absolutely nothing to do with her choice was encouraging and represented the kind of accountability that is necessary for affair recovery. However, words of accountability must be matched by actions that demonstrate genuine remorse and commitment to change. Sarah's acknowledgement that she had never been good to Robert throughout their marriage and had been manipulative revealed a pattern of problematic behavior that extended far beyond the affair itself. This admission suggested that their relationship had fundamental issues that predated the infidelity and might be even more challenging to address. The pattern of Robert always being the one to bow down and apologize in their marriage indicated a dynamic where Sarah avoided accountability and Robert enabled her behavior by consistently taking responsibility for relationship problems. This dynamic would need to be completely restructured for their marriage to become healthy. How can a marriage survive when one partner has a long history of avoiding accountability? How do you break patterns of manipulation and enabling that have existed for years? Robert's observation that Sarah was being kinder more recently and making efforts to prioritize their relationship represented positive changes, but these improvements were occurring in the context of years of problematic behavior and ongoing boundary violations around her continued gym attendance and lack of transparency.
The increase in physical affection that Sarah was showing aligned with Robert's primary love language, suggesting that she was making some effort to meet his emotional needs. However, these gestures of affection existed alongside continued behaviors that undermined trust and security in the relationship. Robert's acknowledgement that he could see behavioral changes, but that trust hadn't been rebuilt, highlighted one of the fundamental challenges in affair recovery. Positive changes in behavior, while necessary, are not sufficient to repair the deep emotional damage caused by betrayal, especially when some concerning behaviors continue. The fact that Robert's spidey sense was constantly activated indicated that he remained hypervigilant about Sarah's behavior, looking for signs of deception or betrayal. This state of constant alertness is exhausting and unsustainable, and it prevents the relaxation and vulnerability necessary for intimate relationships. Robert's admission that he thought about Sarah's betrayal all the time and couldn't see her the same way revealed the depth of trauma that the affair had caused. These persistent intrusive thoughts and changed perceptions of his wife indicated that he was struggling with what might be considered a form of relationship PTSD. Robert's multiple expressions of desire to separate over the previous months showed that despite Sarah's efforts and his own desire to preserve their family, he was struggling to find a path forward in the marriage. The internal conflict between wanting to stay and wanting to leave is common among betrayed spouses who are torn between hope and self-protection. Sarah's financial dependence on Robert as a stay-at-home mother created additional complexity in his decision-making process. Her statement that divorce would absolutely ruin her because she had been out of the workforce for so long added guilt and pressure to Robert's considerations about ending the marriage. How do financial dependencies affect decisions about leaving after infidelity? Should someone stay in a marriage primarily to protect their spouse from the financial consequences of their own betrayal?
The fact that Robert's income represented 95% of their household earnings meant that Sarah would face significant financial hardship in the event of divorce. This economic reality created pressure on Robert to prioritize Sarah's financial well-being over his own emotional well-being, even though she had been the one to betray their marriage. Sarah's attitude that it's been 2.5 years and it's the past demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of trauma recovery timelines and the ongoing impact of betrayal. Her expectation that Robert should be over it by now showed either emotional immaturity or deliberate minimization of the harm she had caused. Robert's feeling that Sarah had swept so much under the rug and that issues remained unresolved indicated that their recovery process had been superficial rather than thorough. Without fully addressing all aspects of the affair and its aftermath, genuine healing and trust rebuilding becomes nearly impossible. The ongoing presence of unresolved issues meant that Robert was being asked to move forward in their relationship without having received the closure, accountability, and behavioral changes necessary for him to feel secure. This dynamic essentially required him to accept ongoing uncertainty and discomfort for the sake of preserving the marriage. Robert's recognition that he had always been an upstanding guy and wasn't an a-hole reflected his struggle to reconcile his self-image as a good person with his desire to end a marriage with someone who was trying hard to fix their relationship. This internal conflict highlighted the complexity of moral decision-making in the aftermath of betrayal. The tension between Sarah's apparent efforts to improve their marriage and Robert's ongoing discomfort with certain aspects of her behavior created a situation where he felt guilty for not being satisfied with her changes, even though some of his fundamental concerns remained unaddressed.
Robert's consideration of how divorce would affect their 3 boys added another layer of complexity to his decision-making process. His desire to maintain an amicable relationship and shared custody arrangement showed his commitment to minimizing the impact on his children, even while prioritizing his own emotional needs. How do you balance protecting your children from conflict with modeling healthy boundaries and self-respect? What messages do children receive when parents stay in obviously troubled marriages? The plan to start with a new therapist represented an opportunity for fresh perspective and potentially more effective intervention in their recovery process. Sometimes, a change in therapeutic approach or personality can make the difference in helping couples navigate complex relationship challenges. Robert's intention to bring up his ongoing concerns with the new therapist suggested that he was still hoping to find a path forward in his marriage, despite his repeated considerations of separation. This hope, balanced against his realistic assessment of their problems, showed his continued commitment to trying to make their relationship work if possible. The fact that Robert was seeking advice and perspectives from others indicated his recognition that the decision he faced was too complex and consequential to make in isolation. The input of others who had faced similar challenges could provide valuable insight into the various factors he needed to consider. Robert's story illustrated the common dilemma faced by betrayed spouses who must choose between their emotional well-being and their desire to preserve their family structure. This choice becomes even more complicated when children, finances, and social connections are all intertwined with the relationship decision. The ongoing nature of Robert's internal conflict, wanting to stay and hope for improvement, while also wanting to leave and protect himself, reflected the natural human struggle between competing values and needs. There was no clearly right answer to his dilemma, only different choices with different consequences.
Robert's situation demonstrated how affair recovery becomes significantly more complicated when the cheating partner continues behaviors that undermine trust rebuilding, even while making other positive changes. The mixed signals created by Sarah's improved kindness, alongside her continued gym attendance and lack of transparency, made it difficult for Robert to assess their relationship's true trajectory. The question of whether Robert should leave his stay-at-home wife after her infidelity ultimately came down to whether he could find peace and security within their marriage given the current circumstances, or whether his emotional well-being required the clarity and autonomy that would come with separation. When is it appropriate to prioritize your own emotional health over trying to preserve a marriage after infidelity? How do you know when you've given someone enough chances to demonstrate genuine change? Robert's consideration of his ability to support himself and contribute to child support while maintaining a reasonable relationship with Sarah for their children's sake showed his realistic approach to divorce planning. This practical perspective suggested that he was seriously considering separation as a viable option rather than simply using it as a threat. The complexity of Robert's situation, involving unresolved grief, ongoing boundary violations, financial dependence, children's well-being, and his own emotional trauma, illustrated why a fair recovery is so challenging and why many marriages don't survive infidelity, even when both partners express desire to reconcile. Robert's openness to advice and different perspectives reflected his recognition that his situation required careful consideration of multiple factors, and that the decision he made would have lasting consequences for himself, his wife, and his children. This thoughtful approach, while painful, was likely to lead to better outcomes regardless of what choice he ultimately made.
The story served as a reminder that forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing, and that being willing to forgive someone for their betrayal doesn't necessarily mean that continuing the relationship is the healthiest choice for all parties involved. Sometimes the most loving action is to recognize when a relationship has been too damaged to continue.